Yes,
Yes,
audio
we
comes
can.
through great.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Right, today is Wednesday, March 29th, 2023. The time is 9:03, and we're going to get the Utah Lake Authority meeting started. We've got a couple of board members excused today. Mayor Kusi is running another meeting. Mayor Johnson's out of Washington, D.C., and I think we're going to see a few more people trickle in. But we've got a quorum, so we're going to get going. So thank you all for being here. Thank you all for the people that have come and are in the audience today. We have a lot of really good presentations today. Just to start out, we don't have the flag here today, so we're not going to do our pledge, but Eric, did you want to give us an inspirational thought?
Sure. Well, today, since we're here overlooking the lake, I would just like to point out that this is a fairly momentous day. Just last Thursday, the Utah Lake Commission closed its chapter, and this is the first operational meeting of the Utah Lake Authority. And as board members and as members of the public, this is a pretty exciting time for us to take a leap on restoring something that is such a precious natural resource to our valley. And that while it is a big undertaking, it is an exciting one, and I would encourage everyone to get involved and kind of really come to the table hoping for positive changes that can make this what we all hope.
Wow, thank you so much. If anybody ever needs to call on somebody last minute for an inspirational thought, we know who to point to in the future. So always ready to inspire. With that, I'm going to turn the time over to the board. If you have anything that you would like to share, any reports, maybe we can just start around the table and come this way and have those discussions.
Yeah, and do you want to start?
No, I think I'm okay.
Okay. Yeah, I asked Eric and Mayor Fulmer how we might exchange ideas and projects that we're working on at Utah Lake. I thought that would be really helpful for me and maybe members of the public. So just a brief update, I have some students in the summer and we're working on some experimental design and communication around the lake and seeing what the public would support for the future and doing some messaging experiments to see what really sticks. I'm really excited to see how we can start trying to change the public mind a little bit to be better informed.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So just from a legislative standpoint, we did get a $5 million appropriation for continued lake improvements. And that was a one-time appropriation, and that's in addition to the 1.5 that we receive each year. To put that in perspective, we typically have operated the Lake Commission on 500,000 or less, between 400,000 and 500,000 for the last few years, and that was mostly funded with local dollars. So what we've done with the Lake Authority is we've tripled our funding and decreased the amount of local commitment and increased the amount of local control. Okay, so those are a lot of the primary objectives. One of the things that I would like just to give a heads up to the authority board is I had legislation ready to go to create a tax increment finance zone around the lake. And that would be dependent on cities opting in. So it would be voluntary by the cities, but they would need to adhere to some standards that would be set by this board for the zoning criteria in order to receive the tax increment financing. And I held that back for a couple of reasons. Number one, I wanted to get our management plan in place, so that would provide some guiding, direction for that. But number two, because we have all of the, we have primarily a board that's made up of local cities, we want to make sure that it's something that you feel not only serves the interests of this body, but also the lake. So for example, as we look at, how do we make sure that the lake is accessible? So, if you're going to adopt the zoning criteria for this tax increment finance, are you making sure that the public has access, that you're treating the lake as the asset that it is, that you're that it's done in a way that accentuates the environmental impact, that minimizes the environmental impact it accentuates the environmental advantages of having a lake next to you. And a lot of that is because, and part of the reason why we want to have a tax increment finance zone around the lake is because some of the uses, in many ways, a developed land use around the lake is more environmentally friendly than an undeveloped and farmland area around the lake. Now there's a trade-off, but we wanted, I wanted to give everyone a heads up that that's something that over this next year, as we come into the legislative session for 2024, I'm going to be looking at. It would likely be a half mile from the lake's edge into the cities, and a full mile in the county portions that are unincorporated. So that's kind of the idea, and we do think that that process will help spur. If we have the cities working in conjunction with the Lake Authority to create a good general plan as part of in order to get this tax increment finance, it will spur the right kind of economic development that's lake friendly. So, just as a heads up, that's what we got.
Thank you so much.
Well, just on behalf of Mayor Kaczynski, welcome to Provo. Thanks for joining us here, and thank you to those around the table who helped us get this facility. And thank you to Representative Brammer, who really was the person who helped us get here to the Utah Lake Authority and get that extra funding. Good. Happy to be here.
Wes.
Just a couple of things if I can. What's keeping me awake at night today and this week is the runoff has started. We have at least one treatment plant that's in bypass portion of the well, and now they're final treatment. It's a small facility, but nonetheless, we're hearing from many others. Threats and that reminds us, speaking of about the city's stormwater project. That stormwater is not just a rural concern, although that's what's keeping me awake. The flooding that we're seeing in the rural areas, particularly in Cache Valley. But it's also, an important concern for urban areas and great concern. I appreciate Representative Brammer's comments about protecting this zone around the lake as it grows. Protections are in place for both the agricultural and the suburban development. So I'll just add a little bit more. We had Utah Lake Yard calls the tree yesterday. They're doing excellence and staff. Sort of charting the future, where are we, and just try to give you a synopsis of where we are. We, I think, have moved into sort of the final phases of looking at data and studies towards putting together the lake model that will be used to develop the criteria and evaluate alternatives, implementing various efforts to help control nutrients. So I think the science work is just about wrapped up. Modeling is underway. I'm really excited. I think we had a presentation previously on watershed, which I think is in good shape. There's a little bit of calibration challenges still going on, but it's going to give us really good information about inputs, where the inputs come from, and I think help us to focus where's the low hanging fruit to be able to take initial efforts towards the objective. We've been hearing about implementation. Implementation work will happen next year. So we're a little bit behind, but moving forward on that. We spent a fair amount of time talking about budget. The project, we think that we have enough money. A little bit of fuel left to protect against unexpected, but we think we have the funds for the project. That said, as you've seen with, a lot of scientific work, there's always new questions that arise that have additional demand. So we're cautious about, cautiously optimistic.
That's great. Any commissioners?
Just glad to be here.
Awesome. Okay, are there any other reports online before I move to the next item? Doesn't look like it, so we'll go ahead and move on to our staff and committee reports. And our executive director, Eric, will present a few reports for us.
All right. So first and foremost, I just wanted to point out that as I did in my quick spiel to start off, today is well, April 1st, in fact, is the first day that the Utah Lake Authority can begin operations. And so from a communication standpoint, most of our communications have been working through the Utah Lake Commission to kind of help us through the operations until this board could begin to start. So I apologize if it's been kind of a quiet start. Really, the only thing that this board had been charged with during the first year or half year or so was getting a management plan developed and approved. That was the portion that we had a green light to work on. And so sorry if it's been quiet on that front, but expect lots more involvement and things kind of floating around from a communication standpoint as we go forward. Okay, so going through the list, hiring of a conservation biologist. This is a big priority. The HB 232 outlines a lot of monitoring and reporting that needs to happen. And we have a lot of projects in our management plan that require some assistance from a in-house scientist. And so we found a conservation biologist. Just this week, we went through the interview process and found somebody and extended an offer, and we have someone coming down that's a Montanan, grown up and educated, and then is living in Salt Lake, and they'll her name is Addison Valdez. Really neat individual. At our next meeting, you will meet her, since she doesn't start until Monday. So exciting to have her on board. And one thing that I would kind of give everyone a heads up, especially those that have project work on the lake, we will be reaching out to Division of Water Quality, Forestry, Fire, State Lands, and making introductions. As one of her tasks will be gathering the monitoring data, and folks out in the audience as well. I see a couple that do a lot of monitoring on Utah Lake. She'll be gathering all of those monitoring points and then developing a monitoring plan to kind of fill any gaps that there may be that would helpfully establish an evaluation of what the lake is like today and what all of the projects that are being conducted on the lake do to help that as we go forward. So expect to hear from us on a connection with that new biologist. I mentioned the Lake Commission was dissolved at our most recent meeting on the 16th. Just wanted you to know that during that meeting, they by resolution gifted the Utah Lake Authority with our office equipment, furniture, things like that, so that we could continue and not have to distribute those up for the board as the initial interlocal had suggested we would. They also handed off the fiduciary reporting and wrapping up this budget year. So FY 2023 from the commission will be wrapped up through our board. So we will have our chair, for example, signing off on those final reports that we submit to the state auditor's office and the transparency office. So we have a little double duty still continued. But that will help us wrap through the end of that year. I wanted to kind of mention, we're going to have a presentation here in this meeting, but I wanted to talk briefly about work along Utah Lake. Much of the shoreline of Utah Lake is delineated wetland. And some of you have worked in delineated wetland before, but it is a rigorous permitting process to do anything, even if it's projects that are highlighting the beauty of our wetlands, putting in a trail or putting in a bird tower so that people can get out there and enjoy it. Those each have an impact, albeit a small one, that needs to be mitigated. And so one of the challenges that some of our marinas, Provost Marina has a master plan. One of the big uphill battles was that required some wetland mitigation work. Many of our projects, all of our trails, all of our marine enhancements typically require some amount of mitigation. And that has kind of held us from some of these projects. And so the Lake Authority would like to develop a wetland mitigation bank that can help with these projects moving forward. So we're going to hear a little bit about that from our consultant on the Walker Way project, that will talk a little bit about what that involves, the creation. And we also have an opportunity to move on that as early as this year. And so we'll kind of walk through that a little later as well, but just wanted to make you or help you understand kind of the purpose behind that planning effort and having something like that set up. A branding consultant. So we don't have a logo. We don't have a lot of branding for the Utah Lake Authority yet. We hired a branding consultant months ago, and we've been holding them off so that we can have a vision and a mission. That is incorporated into today's conceptual management plan. And so as long as we get that approved today, that will be the green light for our branding consultant to get to work and help us develop a logo and other branding materials. So you'll be hearing from them as soon as we get that underway. Legislative report, Representative Brammer mentioned this. Once again, this year we have an ongoing budget of 1.5 million. And the legislature also granted an additional 5 million for lake improvements. So you'll notice when we go to our FY 2024 budget, that is incorporated into that budget. We've got some plans for how that could be used. That's up for discussion. But really exciting to have that level of support. I recently at the Provo River Delta project came across some of the old DNR executives and mentioned the funding that we were getting into the lake right now, and jaw dropped, couldn't believe that we were in the millions going towards Utah Lake now, when for years and years and years it had been struggling to get a few $100,000 here and a $50,000 grant there. So pretty exciting times again. Let's really talk real quick about the FY 2024 budget. So this is a tentative budget. We'll approve it a little bit later, but the last 2 pages of your governing board document will reference this. So the back side of the last page. This is the general fund management plan, or the budget. So we've got wages, benefits, and kind of it tracks similarly to where we have a budget set up with the Utah Lake Commission. However, we have shoreline restoration. So one of the things that we're doing with a budget now, as DNR's watershed, or I guess it's the Division of Wildlife Resources now, their watershed restoration initiative. They wanted the Lake Authority to come to the board with, or come to the table with, some financing for all of this work that gets done on the lake shore. So we've got 140,000 budgeted for this upcoming year. That gets leveraged twice, once with Department of Ag dollars, and then again with watershed restoration initiative. So Department of Ag will contribute, I think, about 123,000, and watershed initiative 70,000, something like that. I'll have a budget once that grant gets approved, but that's about the split, so that it ends up being close to a $500,000 effort for shoreline restoration work. Switching to the back page of the 2024. This is the tentative budget for capital projects. So this year we'll push forward. If you start on the top right, we'll have 300,000 from this year's budget, plus the 5 million that the state appropriated. And then a beginning balance from this last year of 585. As far as use of that, access enhancements, our plan is to put an RFP out to the neighboring communities of the lake for trail or marine enhancements or shoreline enhancements of 3.34 million. Wetland mitigation, 300,000. Sorry, algae treatment, 300,000. Wetland conservation mitigation, 40,000. And then land, 2.2 million. So the land would be for the acquisition of land that could go, that could be developed into a wetland in Provo Bay. We'll have a presentation on that. So total budget in the capital projects of 5.88 million. And with that, I will conclude.
Thank you so much. Are there any questions for Eric? Okay, we'll move on to our consent items. These are minutes from November 16th and November 30th. I just need a motion to approve or take off or discuss. So moved by Brady and a second by Chris. All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Aye.
Thank you. We'll move into our public hearing, budget amendment. I need a motion to go into a public hearing.
So moved.
First by Commissioner Secretary.
Second.
And second by Mayor Lundberg. All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Okay, so this is an amended budget because as I mentioned earlier, we were set up to just be a planning entity for the first from July 1st until we were able to get a management plan created. So this switches from that planning entity to an operational entity. The budget that we're presenting as an amendment really reflects, just so that it's not a surprise that we'll require this much for just 3 months. The intent is to kind of establish what our annual budget more or less is going to look like. Anything left over, so as you go through, these are whole year expected budget items. Anything that is not used, the dollars that are provided ongoing to the Lake Authority are non-lapsing. A portion of 25% of what we have as revenue each year can be put into the general fund. Anything else will be put into the capital projects fund. So having these as regular budget items isn't going to cause us problems. It's just as we close out the year, everything extra just goes into capital projects, as I indicated in that tentative budget. So a total budget of $1.512 is the full amount of the one-time appropriation plus interest income. So
The directorial list we have.
in our general fund, yes, just I don't know if it's a state general accounting rule. But in our general fund, we can only hold from year to year 25% of our annual revenue. But nothing stops us from you transferring everything else into our capital projects and budgeting for the following year. And that's how we intend to operate.
Mr. Chair, I believe that falls just due to 501 status. So as a nonprofit, we can't carry that forward. So it's not necessarily just a state rule.
Okay. For those of you who don't know Cameron Dalton, Cameron comes to us. He is the new appointee from the governor's office, from the governor's office of economic opportunity. And he also happens to be our finance guru. So we're going to take advantage of this. Thank you, Cameron, for being here today. The last page for the amended budget is the capital projects fund, and this is just showing the portion that we intend to pass through. As there's only 3 months between now and the end of the fiscal year, we didn't expect to use the capital projects dollars, so we didn't budget on any of the items for that. Planning to have our capital project dollars start being put to use right at the beginning of this upcoming fiscal year, July 1st. So
Right. Are there any questions for Eric from the public or? Hey, seeing that there's nothing online, right? Pam? Okay, then we can go ahead and move out of our public hearing. Yes, but first we're gonna go out of the public hearing. Do you want to second that?
I will second.
Thank you. And all in favor? All right. If there's no discussion, or if you guys would like to have discussion on this, we can go ahead and move forward with that. Otherwise, I'll need a motion to approve.
I make a motion to approve the bill.
Thank you. Second by Commissioner Sinkovich. And all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Did you get all of that, Pam? Okay. We'll go ahead and start with our presentations, and 6.1 is by Conceptual Engineering, and this is where we'll talk about the wetland project in Polo Bay. And I think we're going to do our presentations up by the screen, and Lars, yeah, come on up.
You can turn everywhere. This is the best place to stay. Yeah, right here, if you would, I'm just gonna get the Zoom shared.
Okay, thank you everyone for having me today. I'm Lars Anderson with Conceptual Engineering, and we are working on the Waukera Way project with the Lake Authority. And as a result of designing the trails and other amenities that are the trailheads that are part of Waukera Way, we found that we're going to have about 20 to 25 acres of impact to wetlands, because it's a pretty long trail system. And so we started looking at ways to mitigate that. And we found a way, potentially. So right now, what we want to talk about is wetland restoration and the potential for creating a restoration site that then eventually gives us credits to offset projects. And so they work together. The key part of that, the most important part, is the restoration of the wetland site, and then following up with the Corps of Engineers to get the credits. We'll talk about at the end here. So first of all, can we go to the slide like this at the end? So we want to cover these 4 items. I know I've only got a couple of minutes with you, so I want to cover what is a restoration area, how do we receive credits, why would we restore a wetland and advance the projects anyway, and how long does the process take? I thought those might be your questions, so I'm going to hit those first. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So, oh, I can do it. All right. Restoration area it's either degraded or it's a former wetland, or it's typically areas around the lake that have been filled in for agricultural purposes, or just got a lot of Russian olive or phragmites or whatever it might be. So, for example, the Powell Slough area, we tried to create a restoration site there with Utah County several years ago. It failed because one of the rules the Corps of Engineers has is that if you're going to have a restoration site, you can't allow hunting in that area, and that's a very popular hunting area. So it fell apart at the end. We found a different site, potentially south of the lake here, where that would work. There's a lot of rules from the Corps of Engineers on how to create these restoration sites. That's one of them. So the Lake Authority is seeking approval to develop this site that right now, the site that we have in mind has both degraded wetlands and filled wetlands. So we would remove the fill and they get credits for that. And then the degraded areas, you remove the invasive species and replace those, and you get lesser credit, but you still get some credits for that. So they work together. The site would showcase the wetlands and trails. One of the struggles with the restoration site is having trails and interpretive signage, but it is allowed. Okay, so how do we receive credits for this? You purchase and restore a wetland site in advance, it can become a mitigation bank. We have to be careful about calling it a mitigation bank, because on one hand, if you receive funds to restore a wetland, it's not for mitigation. But on the other hand, if you restore a wetland and then go and create and request credits for that restored wetland, then you can get credit. So different federal agencies kind of have to walk this balance between the two, or between the several. So the Lake Authority would be the proponent and hold the credits. We've done this before. About 10 years ago, I designed and developed a wetland bank for UDOT. It's down by the Linden, I used to call it the landfill, the transfer station, I guess it is now. And it's about 115 acres. And UDOT controls those credits and only lets them to be used for their projects. So they saw the value in creating a mitigation bank back then. And they don't let anyone buy credits or give credits out because they kind of hoard them for themselves, which is smart because they're so valuable. Right now, a single credit from a wetland bank goes for about $100,000 to $120,000 credit. So they're worth quite a bit of money. And Utah County does not have a mitigation bank available or a restoration site where you can get credits from yet. This would be the first one in Utah County, besides Utah. Okay. Restoration of upland to a wetland. For example, if you take out the agricultural areas, you get a 1-to-1 ratio only if you do it in advance. That's the key. You have to do it up front. If you restore a degraded wetland, typically get a 3-to-1, sometimes it's 5-to-1. Sometimes it's not great. On Legacy Highway years ago, I did that mitigation site, 2,500 acres, our ratio was 17-to-1. Not fantastic. That's because we were building the mitigation site at the same time we were doing the highway. In fact, it came afterwards. So if you go afterwards, they call that a temporal loss. You've lost the time. And so you're kind of behind the curve. If you build it in advance, you get better credits, but you have to put the money up front. You have to build it up front and show that it's working up front. So timing is everything. Credits can be withdrawn from the bank for projects around Utah Lake. So if Utah Lake Authority is holding the credits, then someone can apply and say, hey, I want to build a trail in Saratoga Springs, and I need half a credit. Then they can apply to Utah Lake Authority, and you guys will work out how that works. And then they could use that credit for their project, for example.
On the second item, following the construction Corps of Engineer approval, the Corps of Engineers are part of the process of approving all credits.
Yes. Yeah. So, well, they approve all of them to become credits, and you have a debit and credit system that they approve in advance. And then once that's done, then they don't care as long as you follow the rules that you set up in advance. So like with UDOT's bank, UDOT doesn't have to go to them and say, hey, we're going to take out 5 acres or 5 credits for this project. They do it, and then every year give it an accounting. So they
Accounting to the Corps.
Accounting to the Corps, turn into monitoring. So if you work very closely with them and get it all set up, and then they don't care so much as long as you follow the rules to set up. Okay, why would we restore a wetland in advanced projects? Well, by doing so, you get these better ratios. We covered that. The permitting process is reduced. That's the main reason UDOT did their bank, is because it went from taking a year or 2 to get a permit to 120 days, because you don't have to go build all these mitigation sites all over the place. When I was working for UDOT doing this, we had as many as 12 mitigation sites just in Utah County, just in the valley here. They were scattered all over the place, and you'd have to go do reports every year. And I would spend me and staff would spend a couple months going around doing all these reports instead of all in one place. So you save a lot of money there, you save a lot of permitting time by doing it upfront. And the cost of monitoring and reporting is reduced because the credits are in one location. All right, how long does the process take? This is where it's the road, right? The Corps recently assigned a project manager to handle restoration sites that are like this. Unfortunately, that project manager is no longer in the Bountiful office. This project manager is in Sacramento. This just happened in the last 3 weeks, and they were getting so many requests to restore sites to get credits that they said, we're just gonna put someone else in charge of this, and you're gonna have to go through him. And so it's gonna take a while. They say 1 to 2 years. So we have to get rolling if we want to do this. If it was local, like the one I did for UDOT, it took us a year because we did have to have an interagency review team still, which involves biologists, planners. It involves a big team. You got the EPA coming out of Colorado for that. You got the people in Sacramento, and then us local here. So got to pull all those people together, and that just takes time and effort. The cost of developing an approved restoration site, it can be around $250,000 to develop that up front. Does it pay off on the back end? Yes, but you have to put a lot of effort up front to make it work, and you have to buy the land up front. So it's an investment. It's an investment. Okay, I think that was the last. That was it. I know I was talking really fast, trying to cover it all because you guys got a lot to do today. Any questions?
So in the 1 to 2 year period, the wetlands, this is just the plan and committing to the restoration. It doesn't actually mean the wetland would be functional within those 2 years, or does it?
You can start on construction during that time. So you develop what's called a mitigation. First, you do a prospectus. You submit that to the court and say, this is what we think we want to do. They say, okay, develop your mitigation banking instrument. They use a lot of banking terms because it's kind of like a bank. And you develop this big long document, and then you can start construction, and you get as much as 20% of the credits up front while you're developing the team and removing fill and monitoring it. You're starting that process. So that 1 to 2 years can include construction. It did on the last bank I did, but doesn't always.
And that was how I had interpreted that as well. And I'm curious, if you create the wetland or increase the functionality of the wetland, and then it's not successful and the court doesn't check it off, what happens to the 20% or the future plan credits?
You keep working on it till you get it right.
Okay, that's been the experience I've seen as well. So I just think it's important to point that out, because I think that that's one of the risks of doing the mitigation is that, in some of the mitigation that we've seen, it can be, a 10, 15 year process where they're still trying to check it off. And we have some mitigation on land that we manage along the Jordan River where they're about almost coming up here on 15 years. So they're very far.
You talking about Galena?
Yeah.
Yep, I did that one too.
Okay.
Sorry.
Oh, that's all right.
The challenge with that has been water.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
And so we need to pick one that is much closer to the water source. In that case, we were using a water source that was coming from the prison and was not as reliable as we thought. So lessons learned. We want to rely on groundwater, but we have to guarantee water shares as well in order to make it through this process.
Okay, and then just for clarity for the rest of the board, I think it's important to note what other options would be available. And I think in other areas, there's options to buy credits. And I believe that's not in existence here on UW.
Correct. In the Great Salt Lake area, there's a private bank called Machine Lake Wetland Bank. And if you are around the Great Salt Lake up to West Valley area, you can buy credits from them. If you in Tooele, can't remember the name of the group. They just applied for a bank out in Tooele to be able to handle the Tooele area. I don't know of any banks here besides the UDOT bank. And again, they kept it private. You can set up the rules however you want as far as who can pull credits. You could say as the Utah Lake Authority that you'll only sell credits to agencies or cities, or you can say, oh, we'll even sell them to developers. You have that option. That one would be a little bit tougher to get approved, but you might be able to. Right now, the machine lake can sell to anyone. They can sell to developers, whoever wants credits. UDOT doesn't. So set up the rules, like instrument, however you like.
Is there a site where we can go and see kind of a map of the current ones around the lake, right?
Our proposed area,
Proposed.
There are none right now around the lake.
yeah,
Yes, we have done.
we have none around Utah Lake right now. And I don't know how much you want to go into the potential site, just a potential site right now.
I would just say that we have identified a potential site. We spoke with the landowners. It would be a voluntary seller acquisition. So no imminent domain or anything like that. It's we found somebody that would have a piece of property in just the right location, and they were interested in selling a portion of that.
Yeah, before we just for the boards, just to be careful, we need to be careful that we don't talk about potential sites before they're acquired. And so we would go into closed session to discuss the acquisition of land. And so just be careful on anything like this, that you be careful that exactly mess around with pricing and everything that way. Do we have an idea on how many credits we anticipate needing, at least the horizon time and the number of credits that we anticipate needing? And that may not be a fair question, so
Well, I think it's a great question, because you got to plan things out. So we'll take Waukera Way as your example. We have, let's say we're able to reduce it to the absolute minimum of 20 acres. If we wait until that project goes and we build the credits at the same time as building the project, it's going to be a 3-to-1 ratio. So we're going to need 60 acres to mitigate for Waukera Way. If we build it in advance of the Waukera Way impacts, then you're going to need 20 acres, which would leave you, if you bought a property large enough, if you could get somewhere between 50 and 70 credits, that would be ideal. There will be more projects coming, and there's no time frame, a deadline on when you can use those credits, just until they're gone. So when you decide to build, it really matters about how many credits you'll have to use.
so and it's typically a credit is each acre to acre is how they factor it.
If you do it in advance.
Yeah, if you do it in advance.
Yeah.
And if you're not in advance, it'd be 3 acres of wetlands, credits or wetlands reclamation or whatever you're talking about. And then 1 acre of the improvement that you need to credit.
Yes, that's best case scenario, because sometimes they're as high as 5-to-1, 6-to-1, depending on how far out we build it compared to when you impact it. So that gap in time costs more in credits later.
Yeah, thank you. I was wondering if it's similar to the Provo Bay wetland reclamation, like that's one example of a wetland, right, reclamation that's happened around.
Provo River Delta project.
Yeah. So I was
Yes,
saying we don't have any mitigated wetland.
We just didn't get it correct.
So
Yeah, we still
yeah, the Provo River Delta project, as you look through there, it was both a lift and an impact, right? So my understanding is that was the project itself mitigated both its downsides and the upsides kind of balanced out. So it's what is the name of that again? Project specific mitigation.
yeah, on site, in kind.
So it's not a bank per se, it just is a project that took place in wetlands
Right.
that offset any impacts that it caused.
And their focus was more for the June Sucker, whereas the focus of a different project would be more typical, just wetlands and wildlife that are found around Utah Lake. And you mitigate for different types. You try to get some wet meadow, you try to get some emergent marsh, you have to have a minimum 10% uplift. So there's more diversity and represents more of what you see all the way around. So it's a little more general, where they are very specific to the fish.
So I just want to say, I think that this is great, because we've had a lot of scenarios in the history of Utah Lake where one of the main challenging factors is being able to mitigate from those impacts on wetlands, and it's really been probably the bottleneck for trail development around the lake. So I think this is a great idea. I think this is a good plan to move forward and do this mitigation. I do think though that we should consider, as you had mentioned, what mitigation uses we would want to use these credits for in the future. So prior to engaging in the development or purchasing the property, we should identify those uses that the credits could be utilized for. Because I think the Utah Lake Authority has a very specific mission to improve Utah Lake, and having those public access improvements and trails and those things really line up perfectly. But perhaps a facility or something else on Utah Lake being on. So I think that'd be good.
I have a question for you on that. Do you think that we kind of capture that in our management plan with our overall vision? Because I feel like it might be hard to really assign things, particularly as we're planning for the future, because that might change, but maybe in our mission and our vision, we capture that sentiment as we go through.
Yeah, I think in that context, it's fairly well define what we're after. I think it just doesn't necessarily keep us from being able to do that.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes, go for it.
So just to clarify, I think the question that was being asked is if we should have these lined up kind of one for one credit versus project. And I guess in my mind, the whole point of this is a bank for future projects. And so if we have an estimated number or idea of how many credits we may eventually need, that may help us, but I don't think lining these up in a 1-to-1 ratio will really ultimately serve us, because I think we need to have these preserved in advance of the project. And so I don't know that we can identify all those projects at this point. Is that what you were saying? Have I kind of captured that?
No, I don't think we could specify exactly which projects. I think just the basics of what type of project. So if the intent of the authority for, like in this case, I think this is very much driven by a trail project, and that would be the main goal here. But there's obviously going to be leftover credits once that mitigation is done. And I think being able to say the particular uses that the authority would be interested in seeing these credits applied to in the future, that would be advantageous. So we know what we're mitigating for, and we have those goals in mind. And I think Mayor Mayor Fulmer's comment about the plan makes sense. I think a lot of that's already built into that. So perhaps we could just recognize that the mitigation credits could be utilized to advance the goals of the conceptual plan or the authority's plan.
Yeah, and I would absolutely support that. I think the management plan is a good guiding document, guiding principles, and obviously details will come in the future. But I think if we want to formalize that these credits will be used for the plan as outlined or as amended in the future, I think that's good to just be on record for that. But that's our guiding principle, our guiding doc.
Representative.
I think it would be helpful to, in addition to saying what we intend them to be used for, what is the process for awarding a credit or giving a credit? So is this going to be an administrative decision, or is it going to be a board decision? And when you do it, and when you set up that process, you say, okay, well, this is the board decision. What is the criteria for those, for that, for the consideration of that? So if you were to take the management plan and the statute, say, does it fit within this? That's what staff would be presenting onto the board for approval of this. And just setting up that process to say, look, when we do credits, we bring it for a vote, or we do it by a project. We approve the project, we give a credit allowance, and then we allow the administrative staff to allocate according to that project. It's just, what is the process we want set up for credit award? Which is not a word, but it's supposed to word.
Yeah. Very well said. That's exactly what I was.
And I probably don't have all the pieces of this, but what I'm thinking is, this sounds like almost a no-brainer. Like, we've got some one-time money. We know we're gonna need it. I would just hate to see us spend time on this process stuff and what are our criteria. To me, the bottom line is 50 years from now, 1,000 years from now, anything we do now with money we have to get, this seems just so wise. So my core instinct, and I might be missing something, is, man, this is this is a critical piece. Let's move ahead and just get going on it. Let's find the site. Let's vote on it. Let's spend some money and do it because the payoff is gonna be enormous and we can figure everything else out later. This to me seems like full speed ahead is what I'm hearing. But again, I may be missing something in this. That's my instinct.
Sounded like a motion for support.
Well, I don't know if we're in this discussion, but if are we there, we need direction from the board.
If this would be a good opportunity to get direction from the board, so that we know that the board is comfortable moving ahead with the development of wetlands for this purpose. So yeah, it would be really helpful to have that direction. And just so that we're all clear, there's administratively, we also applied for a grant to help with the development of the wetlands portion of it. And we're successful in receiving that grant. So we have, in addition to our own budget, an additional 1.6 million for the development of that. So
And it sounded like the overall discussion was, we want to move forward with this, we're going to use our guiding principles that we're going to approve, and we're going to use the right administrative process and legislative process to make this go forward in the future. Is that the motion that you're putting in? Representative, did you have to say that?
I'm happy to make a.
Yes.
So it would be a motion to support the acquisition of land to develop wetland credits. And in addition, something that would be run simultaneously or but not prior to would be the development of the awarding of credits and then some staff recommendations on that to be presented.
Thank you. So this is a motion for guidance. Because it's general, but we just felt like you needed to hear from the board. So I'm just going to get it.
In this general, there's not an area specific that we haven't discussed.
Can I get a second? Okay, everybody in favor of this general guidance, I think this is where we are going forward. Everybody in favor? Anybody want to make additional comment?
Yeah, I think it's a direction to staff is usually how we frame this, right? To go down this path of bringing us, work on properties that look like we could acquire and bring them to the board. Yeah, and show us what you got and go down this path.
So this proposal is including language of bringing closed areas.
Yeah.
for acquisition.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and I just want the board to say, yes, we see this as good, or we still have some comments, so.
This is not just a one-time thing. This is the idea that the staff sees opportunities, that they bring that to the board. As opportunities, or just because these wetland credits are going to be, we're always going to want to be ahead of the game on this. And so, and I don't know that there's a whole lot of downside to doing this. The development of wetlands will serve the purpose of the lake and it will serve the development of areas of need. And so it's just be opportunistic, bring that to the board.
so it also adds permanent conservation wetland areas on the lake shore. So it is a huge win for the lake, the water quality, for future generations that want to enjoy, pristine wetlands. It goes on the goal for them too.
And it helps establish a deliberative process in this whole selection.
Sounds like everybody is in favor and there's no real controversy here, so you have your guidance to move forward. Thank you. We'll go ahead onto our, and thank you for all of the work on these.
But it sounds like Cameron Dalton.
Oh, Cameron, did you want to say something additionally?
I apologize. I didn't have the raise a hand feature online. And again, to everybody, I apologize for not being there in person. There was a little miscue on me being out of town and getting the info. So I wish I were there in person, but just a general comment. There have been a few comments online through chats that I think are more appropriate to address during the public comments section. But they apply to this vote or kind of this discussion that we've just had. So I absolutely am in favor of what we just voted for. And I just want to make a comment to those that were online. Again, I think we covered, this is guiding principles. There was one comment that a particular family was not participating and not selling. And my response to that is simply, this is a voluntary program. It's not mandatory to participate or sell. And so this is just guidance to the board that we should, and I believe we should bank these credits now when our leverage ratio is higher, and then we will find and vote and follow the appropriate process to actually apply and use those in the future. So Just my comments, I wanted to kind of be on the record there that I absolutely support this direction. And to those comments and questions online, I think we can address those in detail a little bit further down the road in the process. These are more guiding principles. So just to clarify, this is not locking us into any one specific plan. This is our theory to follow a master plan. So if that is correct, then again, absolutely, I think that is the right direction to go.
And that was my concern too. We're not saying we endorse this particular thing, just saying conceptually, this is a really great. Is that right?
Yeah, to Representative Brammer's point, there's several sites around the lake that could be used for this purpose. And so what I'm hearing is the next step is to go figure that out. And fortunately, to Eric's point, we have the money to construct it once we determine what site that is. And that's our orders to go do, right?
Is that what you meant by that?
Yeah, just saying like, we're not voting at, yes, this is the program we want to go to, this is the project we want to do, just saying generally, like wetland banking mitigation seems like a way forward.
Yeah.
See, that seems general. And then
I suspect that at our next meeting, we will go into closed session, describe a particular parcel that we land on and get approval on specific details to go forward. So I would plan on that for our going forward.
Okay, sure. One question. So our one-time appropriation we're working with, I know we don't have any specific plan we're looking at today, but conceptually, is that appropriation going to be enough to fund our future credits? You think they're going to be? Yeah.
Thank you so much. All right, we'll now hear from Jacobs Engineering on the draft conceptual management plan.
Thank you all for this opportunity. My name is Dave. I'm with the Jacobs Engineering team, joined with our deputy project manager here in Irvin. It's a pleasure to be with you all again. I think we were first in front of the board in November 30th to kick off this project, and here we are seeking approval of the conceptual plan. Just gonna go through a little bit about the background, the timeline of the project we've been going through, and kind of the details of the scope we've been through and kind of where we're going from the creation of the planning team to help guide the development of the management plan, the process we went through to develop the vision and mission, goals and objectives in the plan. And then the conceptual plan itself that has been out for a 30-day comment period. Hope you all have become familiar with and had a chance to spend some time with. And then, yeah, we'll talk about the path forward and get to an actual management plan for solid. So you're all very familiar with the House Bill 232 that created the Public Authority. As Mr. Ellis referred to, one of the first tasks was to develop should be in place by April 1st. Here we are, right? And with the conceptual plan that has been developed and hopefully will be approved. So to get here, we picked off and kind of developed a scope of work and do that with you all. We convened the planning team. Again, this planning team was meant to.
Yeah, I understand making front of Sam just a little bit easier to hear for these people.
So we can convene the planning team. All the members of the board were invited to participate in that planning team. With that said, the option is given to have alternates identified for each member of the board to participate. We really wanted to represent the breadth of perspectives and representation of that planning team. And we started working with that group in December. And held a couple of workshops again before we could really get going with a conceptual plan. We needed to have some basic vision and mission statement for both Utah Lake Authority and the management plan itself. So we held a vision and mission workshop on December 20th, and then a goals and objectives workshop on January 18th. These are a couple of pictures from those workshops. And then we got to work, really didn't have a lot of time. We got to work on this conceptual plan as soon as we could. And that went out for a 30-day comment period, starting February 20th. That just closed last week, March 27th. We received quite a few comments and during that comment period, and we reviewed all comments, talked a little bit more about that. And based on those comments, we developed an updated version of the conceptual plan, which included some red line changes for you all to review in advance of this meeting today. That was provided to you on Monday. And here we are seeking approval by April 1st. We still have the opportunity to develop a clean version of that conceptual plan. If there would be things comments you have or additional suggested edits that potentially could make things. I guess talk a little bit more about that planning team. And really just, again, as we've gone through the conceptual plan, we really looked to that planning team to provide that key input. The table here shows the representation on the planning team. We wanted to start with kind of really understanding the breadth of issues and concerns around Utah Lake and what we want to be addressed in a management plan. We work closely with that group in workshops and then providing some kind of interim deliverables that got us towards the conceptual plan. We envision continuing to work with the planning team as we develop the actual next iteration of the management plan, again, to get their input and direction. So I mentioned the vision and mission workshop. We started with a strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats and an exercise to really, understand the breadth of what the current issues and opportunities are with Utah Lake, and really needed this overarching vision statement to guide the work of the Utah Lake Authority and the development of conceptual plan. So what the planning team came to was, as a national gem, Utah Lake is home to thriving ecosystems, world-class recreational opportunities, and vibrant communities. And then for the mission of the Utah Lake Authority, the Utah Lake Authority leads a cooperative effort to identify, fund, and implement projects and programs to enhance the lake's ecosystems, recreational opportunities, and thriving ecosystems. So then these, the vision and mission really set the stage for how we would think about the management plan and goals and objectives, the specific goals to be addressed in that management. And so in a goals workshop, we really started with what's the framework for goals for this management plan. And we came to this kind of vision theme based framework. So we have our themes of thriving ecosystems, world-class recreation, and vibrant communities, and work with, largely still relying on information that was generated, kind of our brainstorming at the workshops, from the SWOT analysis, and the resource concerns and ideas for goals that came out of opportunities that were brainstormed, to where we came up with 4 goals under each of these vision themes. And those are shown here, in this kind of summary figure, that's part of the conceptual plan. And then, took it a step further to come up with objectives for each of those goals, really spell out what are the individual pieces that could get us towards achieving each of those goals. And then further, we developed a list of strategies that would take us to achieving the objectives and things. So this is just kind of a snapshot of the cover of the conceptual plan and the table of contents. So we documented kind of the process we've gone through, the vision, mission, multiple objectives. We wanted to go through an inventory of existing projects and work being done on the lake and kind of juxtapose that with the kind of the goals that were identified by the planning team and understand where do the gaps lay, what's already being done to get us towards those goals and where are the major gaps that need to be filled. So we developed this framework for doing that gap analysis. In part with the limited time we had in developing the plan, we did not fully go through that gap analysis, but we will. That's part of the next step. But anyway, there's a chapter that describes that gap analysis that will be fully fleshed out as we move into the next iteration. So we did document the existing management strategies related to the lake or on the lake. We wanted to, so within those management strategies, we want to be able to develop monitoring metrics for success related to monitoring to be able to kind of evaluate how we're doing. Are we getting towards achieving those goals? And this plan really, as we talked about, is really meant to get that. And so moving forward, once projects are identified and funded and implemented, we want to be able to use that framework to understand progress, success, existing continual gaps, and to be able to take that and reevaluate where there is the majority of the resources and shift plans. We have a chapter on project prioritization, and that's going to be really important to, as requests for funding come up, or as we evaluate the strategies in the management plan. How do we identify where to start and what to fund now versus later? So this prioritization framework is also included in the conceptual plan. Again, there's more to be done there. This is conceptual. That will be really important. The implementation is really the additional details of how to take these strategies, identify the plan, and how do we plan for putting them in the ground and putting them in practice. There's a chapter on public input, future updates. Again, this is meant to be dynamic and plan that we can be updated. So the framework there for how those updates will be made. And then what's not shown here is, I'll talk about in a second, is we included an appendix with all the public comments that we will be 30 days. So again, this was made available for 30 days, and it's available through the Utah Lake Authority website. Through the website, you're able to link to the web page we created, which is called the Project Hub. And here's where anyone was able to access the plan and submit comments to the impact. We received 309 individual comments from 29 different commenters. We reviewed and responded in some way to each one of these comments. For some of them, we made edits to the conceptual plan. For others, we may have provided a response that indicated that we planned on spending time and considering that comment, working with the planning team to address it. like during the second phase of the project where we're developing the draft plan. And other comments simply merited a kind of acknowledgement that we received it and that there wasn't any action needed. The red line version of the conceptual plan that you received on Monday really only preserved the red line changes for more substantive changes related to the conceptual plan. Some of the simple fixes that we needed to. So anyway, you have that available to you in front of you. Talk a little bit about next steps. I know we're maybe a little behind schedule here, so it won't take too much time. We plan to do a public input survey. We heard a lot during the 30-day comment period, but we also heard that there's interest in more opportunities for public input and public involvement. So we're working on developing a survey now. And then really our big next step task is develop the draft. We'll be working with the planning team. We'll likely be scheduling some meetings and workshops with the planning team. We mentioned the gap analysis and describe that. In addition, the main components that need to be further fleshed out and integrated into the implementation plan and prioritization. We are planning on, at this point, planning on getting a draft of that answer plan by the beginning of August. With everything about it and the final plan done by the end of August. So that's what we have. Appreciate it.
Great, are there any questions?
So on the roadmap, we still are we in the final or we're midway?
Yeah, we're just
Are we before the crossover?
So we are at this phase here, so we developed a conceptual plan and we're moving into kind of a review and kind of process getting again moving forward with the draft. We'll have to go and review once that's developed in a comment period this summer and then
So today we approved the conceptual plan, and then by fall, we'll have the more fleshed out comprehensive version of that.
And by statute, we will be violating the statute if we haven't adopted a plan to some degree by end of March.
More or less, yeah.
So- But yeah, so
Yes.
just making sure we see where we're at. But it sounds like there's public review, more changes being discussed and made.
So, out of curiosity, what if we are not in compliance after first? What does that mean?
Limbo.
we just need to follow
Nothing too crazy.
the goal line with the programs.
Well, my only concern, and I know we're under a tight timeline, is we have 80-something pages of public comments, but like that yesterday. You know, we all have other responsibilities in life, right? Getting that yesterday and being asked to vote on it today is a pretty tight timeline. I've not been through all 80+ pages of public comments. I understand our timing, and this is a conceptual plan. I hope we have a lot more time to review things in the future. I went through that, and there's a lot of comments from my constituents on that plan. And I have frankly had enough time to vet it.
I guess the one thing that I would mention is that as we vet through or as we complete the final comprehensive plan, that there is room for us to make edits and changes. And if there are critical elements that you felt through your constituency or yourself,
Sure.
those could be incorporated on that final.
That's fine.
Yeah. We felt it was important to include those comments as an appendix and as I said, we made changes to address some of them and for others, we fully plan on spending time with the planning team and considering what changes need to be made.
Chris, how much time do you think would be appropriate for us your schedules.
Well, it
I
really
mean,
doesn't-
it's a good comment. I always have this comment in my city council where I like things, a certain time before. And so I'm just wondering.
I don't know. I mean, 80+ pages is a lot to get through in a day and a half. We have to have this voted on by statute by Monday. So it's not like we're gonna have another meeting for between now and then.
I think in the future, maybe we should plan for like a week in advance, sort of things turned in. For me personally, going through them, because we're still in the conceptual phase, and I know we can still build these into the document, I felt comfortable moving forward with that. But I'd like to hear other comments, and then we can take a motion to either continue or to approve.
So first, I just want to commend the Jacobs team because I think the turnaround on this was
Pretty tight.
incredible.
Yeah.
And they, they started and they had a very tight timeline. So I think it was really difficult to pull it together in that amount of time. So it looks great. I think there's your response to the comments and, getting into the guts of the actual plan. It makes a lot of sense to me, but I am curious what this conceptual plan means for, like the decision matrix as far as, ranking projects that goes, will we use the conceptual plan in the interim between now and when we adopt a final plan, or will this be something where it's really just to start giving us the momentum to get to that point of having a final plan?
I think it's giving you broad direction for you're looking for right now.
Yeah.
We'll narrow down the language. I'll do that,
Well, and I think that's a good question. I'm sorry.
I was just say that if there's some thing I'd like to see more of at the very beginning is like chapter 6, where it talks about different agencies doing certain things for the lake. Is an emphasis on local municipalities having large say on how the development occurs in that jurisdiction, which would reflect the citizens.
To your question, in my opinion, I don't believe that we would be able to use it as a formalized guiding document. And so the opinions of the board as they make decisions would still rely upon your individual discretion for that guiding document.
100% of guidance document, it's not binding.
That's right.
And if I may share just one other comment on that, we made a variety of comments as well. And there's also a variety of folks within our agency that I represent that made comments that weren't necessarily addressed in here. And I look at this as an opportunity to to dive into the actual plan and get those comments resolved. And there are some things that directly associated with forestry, fire, and city lands and the authority that we have left that I think need to be dealt out and discuss some of the logistics about who's doing what and how these things work on, how our partnerships work moving forward. But overall, I think that the concept is a big one, and I think they've got some good ways.
That's great. Do you guys feel, go ahead.
So I've been a part of the planning team, and that was an organized effort, as mentioned. The board members got to kind of pick who was on that, and we had really great, robust discussions, and it was very helpful. And my main thing I want to say is I would really like the chance for that group to do one of our long, deep meetings with these public comments and everything. I don't like the idea of the consulting team having to sort of resolve things off. Well, there's this public comment here. That's what I think that planning team is there to, because we had some interesting, we're kind of heading down this path, and then one person says, well, we need to think about this too. Oh, you're right. And all of a sudden the group kind of shifts to a different way of thinking. And I want that to be a part of this. When we got these public comments, I would like to see that happen before we go. And I don't know if the right answer is to say, to vote and approve this on maybe we call it approval of a draft concept plan. And now we've met the statute because we have adopted a plan. It just happens to have the word draft in front of it. But let's get our team back together, do that deeper dive on the public comments and everything. Come back one more time maybe and build in one more step here, just so that I don't want to bypass what I think was a really productive group dynamic. And I think that's where those kind of decisions are best are. Not by an email of someone, that kind of thing. It's discussing it in person with lots of time. And that's what I want.
I think we could make a motion where you approve the conceptual plan with the built-in, review of all of those comments.
But just from the statute is there so that there's not a malaise.
you know, you put in a deadline so that it gets things moving. Which is the point, and it's important, you know, and so, I don't know that I think that the feeling that I get out of it is, I think the major rocks are there, you know, as far as the main things that we need to make sure are in the plan are there. And that's worth adopting as it is now. But we also know that there's a lot of public comment and more refining that needs to happen. And that's appropriate. And so I'd like to, you know, move to adopt what we have with the understanding that the planning committee will be meeting to address public comment and make recommendations. And we would have another draft with those recommendations included that we could then vote on with that input.
Got a motion.
That's my motion.
To re-emphasize this thing, conceptual draft, it's not even draft,
That's
it's a
right.
conceptual step before we get to the draft.
One second.
Yes.
All right.
Are we taking action at this point?
We are taking action. We are moving to 7.1 discussion and action to tie them together for time's sake.
I would just like to move to add to the motion that we're gonna build in this planning group process.
Yes.
You know, come back here before we go to the public comment on this conceptual plan. I wanna have one more crack for that planning.
Yes, and I think Brady did add that to his motion, but thank you for the clarity and I appreciate that. So, okay, we have a first, we have a second, all in favor? Aye. Any
Aye.
opposed? Okay. We will move forward to 7.2 discussion and action, approve the FY 2024 tentative budget. We already had this discussion, but are there any other comments on it before we make a motion?
I just have a quick question. And Representative Ramber, perhaps you could clarify. I believe the $5 million ended up being appropriated to forestry fire and city land as a pass through. And I just wanted to confirm whether that was the understanding of the representative.
That's what was done, but it needs to pass through.
Yeah, sure.
You know, like we're getting a little bit of, there's been a little bit of static as far as previously the commission did not have the ability to manage its own money, really. There are state funds. It could get projects that the state would pay them for them. This is different and now it needs to move through.
So would you see the funds being transferred directly to the authority and then the oversight of the forestry?
Yeah, I think it was done that way, not with, because that's how Utah Lake funds had previously been handled. And it was just, I think it was largely an oversight, but it is still different than doing it that way. When you're, you know, like GOEO, when they manage funds, what they do essentially is they say, okay, here's 10% up front, or here's 90% up front. We'll withhold the last 10 once you implement the projects, then we fund the last 10. You know, so it's really a pass through of that 90% right away. And I don't know that there's a reason why these should be treated differently, but there may be something out there.
Clarification, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Can I get a motion?
Move to approve the FY 2024 tentative budget.
Okay, first by Ms. Carn, second by Mayor Lumber, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Just for your awareness, when you leave today and you're going through the exit, you want to push no ticket receipt and then 6720 is your code. So write that down, 6720. We'll move back to 6.3. Dr. Richards is here to talk about food web-based restoration. He's with Oreo Helix Consulting.
Definitely use that one in the spread. It's a fun feature. Nice having people online.
Okay, so a bit of background. My background, I've got a PhD in ecology, worked with Utah Lake ecosystem for about 10 years, almost a decade.
Can you step right
Further into the well, all the way into the well. A little bit. Yeah, right, that's great. You got a soft voice.
Is this big enough for you, Dave? Dave Richards, that TV, big enough for you to read?
Yeah, I'll read off here,
That
as long as you guys can hear me. So I've been working on Utah Lake with mostly with Wasatch Front Waterfall Lake Council. They've been funding me to do lots of research, but we've got a whole bunch of other folks that we work with. And Rich Mickelson at Timpanogos Special Service District, Sam and Sarah Rushforth, Phycology, Brett Marshall, River Continuum Concepts, Dr. Gus Williams at BYU. Mike Weller, he's our Utah native plant expert, Jeff Denvicker at Chambers Engineering, and many others at USU and DWR, et cetera, et cetera. We've been working with lots of folks trying to figure out how this ecosystem functions and what we think the future of Utah Lake should be. So we, Dave Epstein talked about, well, we don't want just Utah Lake to just look pretty, right? We just don't want to say, oh, that was pretty lake with nothing inside Utah Lake's head. So once again, we want a rural, destination for our restoration success, ecological function, shallow temperate lake. So that we think, oh, Utah Lake is more than just water. It's a living system. So Utah Lake is a pretty cool system. I like to say people used to say something like Utah Lake is not Lake Tahoe. Right? You hear that once in a while. I'd like to say Lake Tahoe is not Utah Lake. Utah Lake is, when we restore it, it's going to be 1,000 times better than Lake Tahoe. It's got way more production. We got bigger waterfowl, birds, everything is more fishery productive. So Utah Lake could be way better than Lake Tahoe. One thing about ecological health is what we like to talk about a lot. It's the same ecological health, I think, for Utah Lake is also economic health for the valley and all the citizens here, right? So eco comes from the word oikos, it's a Greek word called for home. So when you're talking about economics, that's how humans interact with each other and their welfare and how their economics work. Ecological is how the rest of the world interacts with the environment itself. So they're both the same thing. Economics and ecological health are pretty much the same thing. Then I got this little catchphrase, it's like make Utah Lake great again. You're into that kind of stuff. So, so here we got a photo I took with one of my drones years ago. Sank into Utah Lake and I never found it again. But if anybody, does anybody have any idea where this might be? Austin is here. This is Vineyard, right? This is Vineyard. A few years ago, if you notice, you got these incredible springs that are coming into Utah Lake when the lake is low. They're disconnected from Mount Timpanogos, our favorite mountain that Utah Lake used to be named after. Notice how dry it is a couple years ago in the summer. Of course, we got way more subdivision going along here, house out here. So one thing I'd like to point out here, we got this green water of Utah Lake. This is not what we want for Utah Lake to look like. So this is for any take-home slide, this is the one I want everybody to remember. You can take this home and look at it later.
Showing you.
So this is what's known as alternative stable states and tipping points. Catastrophic ecosystem shifts. Utah Lake went through a catastrophic ecosystem shift once the white folks moved into town and changed the ecology of Utah Lake. So Utah Lake started up here in the distance past. So I'm using a canoe tipping over to show how you quickly switch to a different stable state. So this is really, this is one that I think you guys should just think about. And then you can talk to any ecologist in the future about Utah Lake. You understand this slide. It's the most complicated slide I'll show. So in the past, and so tipping a canoe over is a good example of how this works. So in the past, we had the clear lake, aquatic plants, native mussels, clams, and snails, and all that stuff. The balanced fishery ecosystem is functioning properly. But then we're moving along this gradient, right? Just, everything is wonderful. We're just moving on. The bottom axis is degradation or time. In this example, we're going to use total phosphorus, nutrients, and parts time. So as we move through time and increase degradation, you're moving along in this nice clear water state, so everything is wonderful. But then all of a sudden you get to this tipping point. In June, you just drop down to this turbid outline native biomes, right? So we're all having fun and games here on Utah Lake in the past, but you go over and see the clear water lake, you tip over. Once you get down to this part of the stable state, this alternative stable state, you're upside down and you're canoeing your kayak, and it's really hard to get back right side back up to what it used to be. Plus, it looks like this, we're going down through a little bit of white water. So it could get worse if we don't take care of it. So the deal is with these alternative stable states, going back up to this clear water, you can't just go back up to what caused the tipping point, like certain density of carp or certain nutrients. You can't just go back up to here to get there. You have to go way, 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 way back, and it takes a lot more restoration to get back to where our state. So it's not going to be an easy process. So that's one of the things that's really important to think about. Utah Lake, we're at this alternative stable state out here, but we want to get back up to here, but we're going to have to go way back than what originally caused it to go down. Does that make sense? Okay, so we're developing lots of food web models for Utah Lake, and the way ecosystems work is there's three components, typically three components that are part of an ecosystem: the physical, the chemical, and the biological components. And we're looking at the food web part of this, here with the biological components, and that's our main focus for a lot of the research that we do. We've got several different models that we're using. We're using structural equation model. We're using multi-metric index of ecological integrity, which this index has dozens and dozens of metrics that we're using that we think are important to measure how the lake is improving. So you have measure these metrics. There are different kinds of zooplankton metrics, different kinds of phytoplankton, different invertebrates, different fish metrics. We've got almost 60 different metrics. They're not that hard to calculate if you go out and collect the data. Go out and collect the biological samples. You can calculate these metrics, and you can use these to see how well each one of these metrics is going to tell you something a little bit different. You can use all these metrics to tell you what's changing in the lake and how we're improving. And so also we've got a data intensive bioenergetic mass balanced food web based model, which is our big food web model that we created, and it's in the working stages. And so here's all the different the species that live in the lake that we've modeled so far. These are all the these are the phytoplankton, the algae, and the benthic algae, and the we'll call it detrital snow, the detritus, things that fall down dead into the bottom of the lake. Detritus is an important part of the lake, and this is a biomass. So this is a biomass. This is just a trophic flowogram. This model is way more complicated and gives you way more interesting results to monitor the health of Utah Lake. This one here is just a flow diagram. Right, carp have the most biomass in the lake, the large carp. But here I'm just showing. So, for example, the little baby carp, the green is what the little baby carp eat. These are from all Utah State University of GWR diet analysis of the fish in the lake. And this is what are eating little baby carp. So almost all these fishes are eating the little baby carp. So for each one of these taxa, we know what's eating it and what they're eating. Then we put this into our model. And we do all kinds of really cool stuff, and we can find out what the health of the lake is and what we can do about it. So I think these could be some primary ecological models for managing Utah Lake, and they're all in development. And we want to share these with everybody, and anybody that wants to add to these or use them or modify them are welcome to. But we could run many scenarios, including nutrient inputs, carp biomass, on whether the fish out in the lake are mostly eating the zooplankton or if there's fish eating fish. We want to balance fishing. One of the things that's real important for Utah Lake is to rebalance that fishing. We look at the aquatic plants, the primary production, and a real critical thing is decreasing the turbidity and the light penetration into the bottom of the lake instead of in the water column. Because right now it's in the water column. It's just the algae that are able to take the light and grow, and they're shading the bottom. But we want to get the lake to have light penetration going into the bottom of the lake. We call that preventive primary reduction. We do global climate change, suffer recovery, or anything else we think of. We can do in these models. So why are we doing ecologically based restoration? One big thing that we're looking at here is that, well, for example, we use total phosphorus. Sediment flux from Utah Lake is about 1,500 tons per year of phosphorus going into Utah Lake. It's about 85% of the phosphorus in the lake being recycled is coming out of the sediments. Atmospheric deposition is about 150 tons. The guys that actually did the research, did all the empirical research, say it's probably much higher than that. Might even be 200 or 250 tons of phosphorus falls from the sky onto Utah Lake every year, but it's, of course, year to year is going to be different. The wastewater treatment facility, 75 tons right now, and that's only, we're about 4% of the nutrients coming into the lake. Tributaries and stormwater runoff is about 40 tons, and it's about 2%. So if we're just going to reduce the nutrients from the wastewater treatment facilities, they're only 4% of the total of phosphorus coming in. And right, we've already spent like $600 million to upgrade the treatment facilities. We want to go even further and reduce that by 50% more. We're going to spend lots more money, and we're only going to reduce by 2% of the total nutrients.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the portion that comes from sediments? You're talking lake bed.
Lake bed, yeah.
So lake bed. So I don't know if you're getting to restrictions, but in terms of dealing with sediments that are in the lake bed, do you have any recommendations on that? Or if that's coming later,
it's coming later, right? Yeah. So one thing that we're finding in Utah Lake is it's a buffered system. So when the concentrations of nutrients in the water column start to decrease for whatever reason, the sediments release that into the water column. So it's just balancing it out. And those sediments are going to be there. So we're only losing 16 to 20 tons of phosphorus downstream on the Jordan River, right? It just exits the lake, but we're still getting all these inputs. So we're saying, okay, so nutrient reduction alone is not going to solve the problem, right? That could be part of the solution, but I'm saying that top-down control or manipulation of the biota and fixing the lake will have much more impact on getting rid of the algal blooms and making the lake function more properly. So ecologically based restoration goals. So I came up with 5 of our primary goals. The first one is to reduce the sediment flux of nutrients into the water column. So we have to stabilize the sediments. One way to do that is to get the lake to penetrate down to the bottom. The benthic algae will grow in the bottom of the lake, and they'll kind of make it a little buffer. So they'll take up the nutrients from the sediment. And the algae in the bottom of the lake will start taking up those nutrients. And of course, I like mollusks, the clams, the snails, and the mussel. And once we start reintroducing the mussels, they'll also stabilize the sediment and filter out the water. So we want to reintroduce our native mussels. And of course, native aquatic vegetation will also stabilize that sediment and improve the quality of the lake. But all of this stuff you've been probably hearing before. But this is what we're finding ourselves on the lake. And of course, we want to have a balanced issue. So we're also doing some limnocoral mesocosm studies on Utah Lake. This is a joint project with Timpanogos Special Service District, BYU, Jacobs Engineering, and Wasatch Front Water Quality Council. They're pretty large corrals. So you can see here, this is our little 14-foot boat. We've got a pontoon boat out here. So they're pretty good corrals, pretty good sized corrals. And we're doing several treatments. So each one of these corrals, we're going to have 12 of them out there this year. And each one of those has a different treatment in it. And we're examining the ecological and chemical responses of all of these different treatments of the corrals. I'll show you a little bit about what's going on. So one of my favorite things is what we're doing, we're sourcing local emergent vegetation with bulrush and cattails. And so we go over right next to our corrals and we go to the shoreline here and collect some bulrush and cattails, and we haul them out in the sled and put them out in these corrals. We also have some explosives out here where we fence this off to keep the carp from coming and destroy that. And when we put this in, when this was underwater, we put it in. Last year the water was really low. So a little more, you can see these corrals here. right? So these corrals were about waist deep when we put them in, we stocked them with our vegetation. And here's one here. This, right now, these are underwater. The ones out further are in water because the lake came so up so far. And then also, one thing, we had a little bit of ice on the lake this year. And ice could be a problem for reestablishing macrophyte these plants because it could tear these things out. These guys were knocked over by the ice and it tore off the tops of them. But as soon as ice left, they stood right back up and they're okay. But now they're covered in water, so they might drown because water could get down into them. We don't know what's going to happen to these guys until later on the season. Maybe we're hoping that their roots and their shoots are still alive and have enough energy to start growing again. But along the shoreline, like right there, you see two exposures. This one was underwater several years ago when we planted it, and they're doing just fine. You can see all along here, the native emergent plants are not going to grow back on their own. I think it's been several years, and they're just not going to make it. We have to start restoring the native plants if we want to get a head start on, because these plants are very important to how the ecosystem functions. Here's a little bit of results from the study. I won't go into any detail, but we have 6 or 7 corrals in the lake, so we took samples. We measured, one of the things that we measured a whole bunch of stuff. But one thing we measured the light penetration, how far down does the light go? And if you're looking at the lake, it's only about, on average, about 30 centimeters deep is how far the lake goes down because it's so turbid and there's so much algae growing there. But if you look at Corral 10, that's our control. There was no waves and no carp. So all we had to do was stop the wave action and keep the carp out. And inside those corrals, you can see all the way to the bottom of the cross. So the light went all the way to the bottom of the cross. So that's pretty cool evidence thing. Reduce the turbation from the sediment, waves pushing up the sediment and keep the carp out. You're going to allow the light to penetrate. And this one here is corral number 7. We actually added nutrients to it at the beginning. You can see how the water clarity is there. That's because that's a kind of really cool thing. We added nutrients and the algae started to grow really fast and really abundant. But the little zooplanktons, these guys were gobbling it up. They just gobbled up the algae that's floating there and allowed the benthic algae, the filamentous algae on the bottom to start growing. The water clarity was so high. It's like even though we added nutrients, once we kept the carp out, reduced the wave action, and let these guys do their job, we were able to improve the clarity of the lake, or at least inside the corral. And one of my favorite things is the native mussels, the clams and the snails, and those 3. So this is a little lone porticula hanging out in Utah Lake where one of the springs comes in. And it's just wondering what the lake would be if there was more of them. These are invasive species, so we don't want more of them. But here is what it could have looked like in the past. This is up Pacific Northwest. It's Margaret Tifra. It's the western pearl shell mussel. But we have a native mussel, Anodonta, that probably is in densities this thick in Utah Lake in some locations in the lake. And we estimate that those mussels and the little clams probably filtered the entire water column out in a week or 2. So the entire Utah Lake was filtered out by the clams and mussels that are invested, improving water clarity. And an example of that would be have 2 aquariums with the same amount of turbidity. Put a mussel in there, one of these mussels, and in an hour, this is what the water clarity is. Same thing we did here at Timpanogos Special Service District. I think it was the board of directors meeting. We both of these jars had water of this turbidity. Put some clams in there. By the time we started talking, they had filtered out that entire jar back there. So reintroducing the native mollusk is extremely important in our opinion. So this is kind of a little graph of what I put together. We want to get the sediment benthic algae growing. We want our little midges to be doing their job because they do a really important job. The clams to do their job. We want the macrophytes to grow, the plants to grow, and we want snails to graze on these because algae grows on these plants and it makes them less efficient and it takes nutrients away from these plants. So we have to have these snails eating the stuff that's growing on these plants. That's going to allow lots of these zooplankton get a place for these guys, zooplankton to live and little fishies to live too. And that's about it. So that's kind of a little schematic of what it's kind of what we're trying to say. Carp removal is extremely important, right? We've got to have carp. We have to have the carp removed from the lake as well as possible. One thing I looked from the literature, so what's the ecosystem effect of carp in the biomass tons per square kilometer? So a significant increase in turbidity is caused by just 5 to 7.5 tons per square meter per square kilometer. A noticeable shift from clear to turbid, like we were talking about that ecosystem shift, 20 to 30 tons per square kilometer. Decline in detrimental effects on aquatic vegetation, 6 to 45 tons. Management threshold densities. Carp removal program might have their own threshold densities, but these are some from the literature from all over the world. What's the carp density, the biomass right now? We're at 90 tons right now. There's 90 tons of, approximately 90 tons of carp per square kilometer. So we've got a long way to go to reduce the carp to get this lake better than it is. Listen, but it's not just the carp by themselves. Remember, it's the nutrients, it's the mollusks doing their job, it's the plants doing their job. It's like getting down to the bottom of the lake.
What was the current number before the state removal program?
They said they reduced it by 75%. So it was a lot. But we talked about Utah Lake as carp. The first people that came out here that, well, Utah Lake is sucker heaven. Now we're saying Utah Lake is carp heaven. This is one of the best places for carp. They're so happy out there. They can't believe it. They're just growing like they're 90 tons per square kilometer. Probably right there's several thousand tons of carp out there.
Do they prey upon the mollusks and snails?
Yeah, carp will eat those, right? So here's a little, I don't know how well you can see this, but this is in Provo Bay. This is some of the aquatic macrophytes that are already growing in Provo Bay. And you look at all these little things swimming around. These are the zooplankton and the little water boatmen. The ones over here is the water boatman. This little water boatman, here's thousands and thousands of little zooplankton that just love living in here. You can see a couple snails in the background grazing on this vegetation. And then if you look closely here, there's millions and millions of little zooplankton swimming around here. You go out, this is not the lake itself, Provo Bay itself, but if you go out to Provo Bay, when the lake is this, Provo Bay is this color, you go into the vegetation and it's actually clear because everybody's doing their job and it's functioning properly. Unfortunately, this aquatic vegetation is Phragmites, so sorry about that. But this is what they're doing in Phragmites. But if we put in bulrush and cattails, this is what we expect to see as well. So for me, the take-home message is we must shoot for the stars if we want to reach the stars, right? You guys have to go for it. You guys are doing a great job. We're going for it. We're trying to make Utah Lake the best restored ecosystem in the world. And we can't just wait around for a star to come to us because we all know what the result of this was 65 million years ago. Right? So we got to get our job, we have to go out and do our best job on it. So with that, any questions or comments? Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for. Okay, thank you so much for coming and presenting this to us, Dr. Richards. It's so helpful. I'm hoping that if you guys do have some questions that you can reach out directly, we can get you in contact with Dr. Richards so that we can really delve into our questions and make sure that you're getting the information that you need. And we can probably make this presentation available to you so that you can look into it more deeply. So appreciate that and you taking the time. We'll go ahead and move into public comments. I think we do have some online. There was a comment that asked from Daniela Larson if we have any upcoming events for Earth Day.
So we're working, if I may, Sharon, we're working with a couple of different groups who are organizing their own events down at the lake. I think right now we're at 3 right now that we're helping coordinate which areas they can go to and such. And then our staff is working with Vineyard City right now for our traditional Earth Day cleanup on the Vineyard shoreline as well. So that'll probably be our focal cleanup. And then our staff will continue to support the other groups that have reached out that want to do their own cleanups in different areas around the lake. That coordination support varies everywhere from just designating location, they have everything they need. Sometimes we donate gloves or trash bags for people. Other times we help try and share their signups to try and help garner more volunteers. But right now, I don't think Vineyard City has a sign up yet published. I'll be working with Anna, the event coordinator, this week on that. But if anybody wants to join, obviously, we welcome all kinds of participation in the Vineyard Shoreline for that. But if there's anybody interested that wants to do their own, I'm happy to help coordinate with that on that.
That's great. Thank you so much. All right, we have a few comments online. Do you mind just opening up the chat? With me?
Sure.
Some of these
Yeah, I can pull it up.
Okay.
Can everybody see that visible enough for the board?
Yeah, I'm just gonna read it really quick.
Okay.
Ben Abbott, this seems very different than the original Wave project that was focused on voluntary landowners donating their wetlands for conservation. It seems like a mitigation plan to justify destroying wetlands for other projects. What changed? Why aren't the ways involved? I believe you were referring to the mitigation plan we spoke about earlier with Lars at Consort. And I think there's some confusion. We weren't specifically talking about any project, and we were just talking about a mitigation wetland bank in general, no actual private property owners. The next comment is Adam Johnson. I'm curious how the ULA plans on seizing private owners' land if this project is going to happen. Again, I think the conversation was around working voluntary partnerships. Jake Holloway, please do not vote on this. We, the Keats Holloway family, are not selling our property or cooperating with Eric. This is not being talked about. I would like to address the Utah Lake Authority more directly. Everything happening behind the scenes is extremely concerning. Thank you for clearing that up. This authority board needs to be involving all board members in the Holloway litigation that has started and why this happened. Thank you for clearing that up. I want to make clear that I am Jake Holloway, the founder of the Caraway Compromise with landowners, have not been invited to a Caraway meeting for the past 18 months. The Caraway and Holloway family will be doing and organizing birthday cleanup. All right, thank you very much. Jake Holloway, is there anything that you would like to say online, or have your comments been sufficient? I will give you 2 minutes.
Yeah, I'm extremely troubled with just how things are processing. I don't understand why we did bring the concerns of your $5 million letter with LRS to you and to Eric, and understanding why a road would be proposed through the Caraway process. We were very concerned that the Lake Authority board members at large did not know about that. We also are very concerned why the Lake Authority board is not in full understanding of you guys questioning our ownership of the property, and also just the turn in terms of us turning towards litigation and no longer cooperating. And so if this is going to be a very successful Lake Authority board, we just wish that all authority board members would be involved and know about what's going on. And until that happens, we're not going to be cooperating with the Caraway project moving forward.
Your comment. Okay.
Your response to that.
There's some fair bit to unpack there. Our intent is to have this board be fully up to speed on everything that we're doing. As I mentioned earlier, the last few months, we have not been an operating board. We've been focused on management planning. But going forward, project-specific activities will be coming before the board on a regular basis. And as well as updates on those projects. So the board will be well informed as to all of the activities that we're doing. And I hope we'll be able to counter additional issues. The property that is the candidate or multiple candidate properties for wetland mitigation is unrelated to the Caraway project. And so there's maybe a little bit of confusion as to what land the Caraway project will include or not include. and it doesn't need to include the Oldway property. And if the family is interested in it, still participating, they'll have that option to participate, just like other landowners in the area. But it does not force any landowners into that project. That's never been the intent to force it to participate. We work with willing landowners on placement of trails and inclusion in the grazing program as well.
Okay, any other public comment? Please come stand over by Sam.
Should be so grand to make sure you face the microphone too. Yeah, thank you.
So my name is Levi Smith. I'm a concerned citizen and any member for Delta Waterfowl. One of the things that I would like to bring up concerning the wetland mitigation is there's been discussion about maybe a WMA for Provo Bay. And the possibility that the waterfowl, the wetlands mitigation is unhuntable. I'm not trying to make those rest areas for the birds. Right? So make it unhuntable, restore the wetlands, pull the birds away from the airport, because I know that that's a concern of the airport. So you can build those credits and meanwhile keep recreation access for and get your credits for mitigation. Just a comment there.
Thank you. Yeah, go.
Sorry, one quick question for you.
Yeah.
Are you saying not to do any wetland work in Provo Bay or not
No.
to do the WMA?
I'm saying do both, but try to plan the mitigation around the rest areas. Try to find willing landowners around the rest areas and pull the birds away, because you can't hunt the rest areas anyway.
Got it.
Right? So if you can get those credits, meanwhile accomplish, get the credits and give a place for the birds to go and get the WMA on Provo Bay, then they all kind of work together.
Great.
Thank you. My name is John Benyon. When Lars began his comments, he showed a slide of the Walk Car Away project. And my conception of that was as a way of, and I'm just starting to learn about it, was a way of conserving that land as wetland, not needing mitigation. So my question is not so much about that project, the Walk Car Away project, but as the general, I can easily see the need for a bank of mitigation acreage, wetlands elsewhere. But it seems that the first priority ought to be to make the trails in a way that they're not damaged as wetlands, and so that they don't need mitigation. And maybe I'm ignorant of all kinds of facts about saying that, but it makes sense to me that we would try first to keep the trailways as wetlands and not the Utah Lake Authority is supposed to be interested in communities and recreation and conservation. And a good way to do that seems to be to make initially to plan the trails so that they don't damage the ecosystem. That's my comment.
Excellent comment. I would just add that is absolutely the intent, and that lots of work goes into finding a trail delineation that avoids as much wetland as possible, and that where we are using wetland, we're using boardwalk where it's possible, but ultimately working around the lakeshore of Utah Lake. A vast majority of that land is considered delineated wetland.
That makes sense, and I believe Lars mentioned that at first, but most of the time was talking about trading for mitigation lands elsewhere instead of preserving the original wetlands as they are.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Soren Simonson. I'm the Executive Director of the Jordan River Commission. As a peer organization that's working on a very connected system, I just want to say congratulations on your official transition now to become the Utah Lake Authority. Eric noted in his some of his earlier remarks that with the dissolution of the Utah Lake Commission, we've just lost one of our governing board members. The commission has been.
Just about finished, just going through public comments.
Sorry. Anyway, with the dissolution of the Utah Lake Commission, we've had some conversation with our executive committee. And we're very interested in seeing this partnership with Utah Lake continue. And so I've already had an initial conversation with Eric, and we'd love to explore ultimately having the Utah Lake Authority become part of the Joint Lake Commission. I don't think we'll ever become an authority. That could change, but I anticipate that we'll remain as an interlocal cooperation entity. But we do rely on all of the partners that support our effort, and we know a healthy lake is part of a healthy river and a healthy Great Salt Lake ultimately because they're all connected systems. So we'll approach you in the future about consideration to become a part of the Jordan River Commission as a Utah Lake Authority, perhaps even part of the commission as an interlocal member because you are a state entity. That would make a lot of sense as well. We wish you well in your endeavors. We'll continue to support your efforts for all of the goals that you were reflected in your management plan today. And we support those efforts. Thank you. And good luck.
What a great group. I'm Kay Nelson. I'm a citizen here in Provo, and I love Utah Lake. And I came here today concerned about the amount of time between public comment closing on the management plan and voting on it. The discussion was really great, and I love what Mr. Karen and Isaac brought up about tapping the brakes a bit and making sure that there's additional looking into the public comments, because a lot of us are really concerned, and I think I speak for most of those who wrote comments, that we are grateful that you're going to take a deeper delve into those comments, and hopefully understand the meaning behind the comments and adopt some of those things that need to be adopted so that Utah Lake can be the best version that it is. So thank you and congratulations on being a new group, and we look forward to working with you and hope the best for you with ULA.
Thank you.
Chair, can I ask a question? Are there any particular methodologies you need and how public comments is received? I feel like the way, and I think I know what you're asking. I feel like it was really cumbersome the way we could make comments with the spreadsheet and cutting and pasting and putting things into boxes. There's so many ways to do surveys out there that are so easy that maybe we've just gotten so used to the easiness of participating in surveys. But this was a really difficult way, and I heard from other people that it really put them off from even making comments. So I think there were people who wanted to make comments who didn't end up doing it because it was really a difficult way to insert all the different aspects of what you were asking for in comments.
Thank you. That's great. Great. Well, it looks like you've come to the close of our meeting, and I get a motion to adjourn. Motion to adjourn. Thank you, Mayor. Second. All in favor? Right. Just as a reminder, the code is 67.